Truckers swore by it. Fleets depended on it. And for years, the CAT C15 seemed unstoppable. Yet almost overnight, the most iconic engine in American trucking disappeared from the highway. What really happened? And why do drivers still call it the last real diesel ever built? 1. The golden beginning, when the C-15 was unstoppable. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the C-15 wasn't just an engine, it was the engine. CAT had already built a reputation with the 3406 series, and the C-15 was essentially its evolutionary child. Same rugged block, same massive displacement, same unmistakable CAT attitude, but cleaner, stronger, and built for a new century. The original C-15s were simple, mechanical-leaning monsters. No complicated emissions junk, no fragile electronics that needed a laptop and 3 technicians just to sneeze. If something broke, any halfway experienced mechanic with a toolkit and a bad attitude could get it running again. Truckers loved it for one reason: torque. CAT engines didn't just pull, they dragged mountains. Even stock tunes produced power curves that felt like you were hooked to a locomotive. And if you were the type of driver who said things like "stock is just a suggestion," you could tune these engines into absolute beasts. A properly built C-15 could comfortably hit 600 to 700 horsepower and still run 1,000,000 miles with nothing more than basic maintenance, and maybe a few prayers. But the C-15 didn't just climb, it dominated. It became the soul of long-haul America. Pete 379s, 389s, W900s. Every iconic highway truck of that era paired beautifully with a C-15. It was the engine you bragged about at truck stops. The one you trusted to pull you through Wyoming crosswinds and Montana climbs. And the one that made CAT yellow paint feel like a badge of honor. For a while, life was good, but the horizon was already shifting. 2. Emissions arrive and things get complicated. The early 2000s brought a new villain to diesel trucking: emissions regulations. EGR systems, DPFs, SCR, the alphabet soup of diesel headaches. Every engine maker had to adapt. Cummins had its struggles. Detroit had growing pains. But CAT faced a particularly nasty challenge. Their engines were built on a tradition of simplicity and brute force. The moment you bolt on EGR coolers, valves, sensors, and complex exhaust plumbing, you fundamentally change the soul of the engine. And CAT didn't want to change. To meet the 2004 and 2007 emissions rules, Caterpillar introduced something entirely new: ACERT technology. On paper, it was brilliant: advanced combustion, twin turbos, cleaner burn, better efficiency. In the real world, well, let's just say truckers learned very quickly that ACERT stood for all CAT engines require tools. The early ACERT C-15s were temperamental, heat-soaked, and allergic to anything resembling real-world trucking conditions. EGR coolers cracked. Turbo systems overcomplicated themselves. Sensors complained like divas. Fuel economy took a nosedive. And the once bulletproof reliability of the C-15 suddenly felt like a memory from a simpler time. To be fair, CAT wasn't the only brand suffering. Every manufacturer stumbled. But the difference was how they responded. Cummins simplified. Detroit innovated. PACCAR learned from others. CAT, they doubled down. 3. The C-15 ACERT era. The Yellow Titan tries to adapt. The C-15 ACERT era is one of the strangest chapters in diesel history. Caterpillar refused to adopt SCR, the DEF-based system everyone eventually switched to. Instead, CAT pushed EGR harder and harder, insisting they could solve emissions without going the blue fluid route. The result? A mechanical symphony that looked impressive on engineering diagrams but put enormous strain on the engine in the real world. Twin turbos were a cool idea until they weren't. Extra heat meant extra wear, constant coolant drama, and too many drivers on the side of the road wondering what happened to their legendary C-15 reliability. Even when the ACERT ran well, it felt more fragile, more sensitive, more un-CAT-like. A lot of drivers said the same line: "It still pulls great when it's running." Meanwhile, CAT dealers struggled with warranty costs, lawsuits, and frustrated fleets. Mechanics got familiar with EGR cooler failures the way baristas get familiar with latte orders. And owner-operators began migrating toward the ISX Cummins, which, despite its own problems, felt simpler and cheaper to keep alive. The C-15 ACERT still had fans. It still had power. It still roared like a lion with a chest cold. But the magic was fading. CAT knew something had to change. 4. The final blow. EPA 2010 and the end of CAT on highway. The nail in the coffin came with the EPA 2010 standards, which essentially forced engine manufacturers to use SCR technology. Cummins adopted it. Detroit perfected it. Volvo embraced it. CAT said, "No thanks." To meet 2010 rules, Caterpillar introduced something called the CAT regeneration system, a wildly complex add-on that no fleet wanted, no engineer liked, and no driver trusted. It was expensive, experimental, and widely regarded as the diesel equivalent of duct taping a jet engine onto a bicycle. CAT realized they were cornered. The cost to develop a fully competitive, long-term on-road SCR engine was enormous. The legal battles around ACERT were draining cash, and off-highway engines, construction, mining, agriculture were still printing money. So, in 2009, Caterpillar made a decision that shocked the entire trucking world. They quit. CAT officially withdrew from the on-highway engine market. They walked away from decades of diesel heritage, millions of loyal drivers, and the most iconic name in trucking. The yellow giant had fallen, not because the C-15 wasn't great, but because the world changed faster than CAT was willing to adapt. 5. Life after the road. What happened to the C-15 after its death? Here's the funny thing. Although CAT walked away from on-road trucking, the C-15 didn't actually die. Far from it. The same block, same internals, same rugged DNA lived on in off-highway form. Construction equipment, marine engines, generators, mining haulers, oil rig equipment. Anywhere emissions rules were different, the C-15 continued to thrive. In fact, some of the most legendary high-horsepower CAT engines today, like the C-18 Marine Monsters, descend directly from the C-15's architecture. And because everything pre-ACERT was so over-engineered, the used market became a gold mine. Fleets held onto old 6NZ and 5EK engines like family heirlooms. Owner-operators hunted pre-ACERT trucks like classic car collectors. Prices went up. Demand never dropped. The C-15 became the forbidden muscle car of the diesel world, louder, dirtier, tougher, and unapologetically old school. And then, the legend grew. 6. A cult icon. Why truckers still swear by the C-15? Ask a veteran trucker what engine they miss the most. 9 times out of 10, they'll say the same thing. Give me back a pre-ACERT C-15. Why? 3 reasons. 1. Power you could feel. The C-15 delivered torque in a way modern engines simply don't. It wasn't smooth or clinical, it was raw, mechanical strength. You didn't accelerate, you surged. 2. Reliability that created trust. A well-maintained C-15 could run 1,000,000 miles without drama. In trucking, that's not just reliability. That's peace of mind. 3. Fixability. Modern engines need laptops. C-15s needed hands. And maybe a hammer. Truckers miss that simplicity, that honesty, that I can fix this myself at a rest stop with a flashlight confidence. The C-15 isn't just an engine people used. It's an engine people remember. 7. How CAT tried to come back, and why IT didn't work. After leaving the engine market, CAT tried re-entering highway trucking through a partnership with Navistar. The result was the CAT CT660, a vocational truck powered by Navistar's engines wearing CAT badges. The idea was interesting. The execution, not so much. Navistar's MaxForce engines were already notorious for EGR problems. Slapping CAT paint on them didn't magically fix that. The CT660 struggled, sales were weak, and CAT eventually ended that experiment too. Truckers made their feelings pretty clear. If it's not a real CAT engine, don't call it one. The comeback wasn't a comeback at all. It was an echo. 8. The real reason CAT lost the highway. When you step back and look at the full picture, the story becomes uncomfortably clear. CAT didn't fall because their engines were weak or poorly engineered. They fell because the world around them shifted, and Caterpillar refused to shift with it. While the rest of the diesel industry cautiously embraced SCR and DEF, CAT dug its heels in and insisted they could outsmart emissions with brute force combustion and layers of ACERT complexity. They poured money, time, and confidence into a system the market didn't want, while competitors streamlined designs, lowered operating costs, and built engines fleets could actually maintain without having a meltdown. CAT underestimated just how much reliability, downtime, and repair costs mattered to big carriers. And perhaps more than anything, they overestimated how far brand loyalty could carry them in an era ruled by sensors, EPA deadlines, and fleet budgets, not nostalgia. Caterpillar was a giant, a legend, the name every driver trusted. But the highway was changing into a battlefield of emissions, electronics, and regulations. CAT didn't lose the highway because truckers stopped loving them. CAT lost the highway because the highway itself evolved into something they never wanted to become part of. 9. The legacy of the C-15, a legend that refuses to die. It's been well over a decade since CAT walked away from the on-road engine market. Yet the C-15 remains one of the most argued about, romanticized, and flat-out celebrated engines in all of trucking. In an industry that moves fast and forgets even faster, the C-15 somehow refuses to be forgotten. You still see clean 6Zs and 5EKs hauling full loads across America, pulling grades with the same quiet confidence they had 20 years ago. You still hear that unmistakable CAT rumble drifting across a truck stop at midnight, that deep, rolling thunder that tells you a real engine just fired up. And you still see owner-operators talking about their million-mile CAT blocks with the kind of pride usually reserved for championship trophies or family heirlooms. Because for many drivers, the C-15 wasn't just an engine under the hood. It was a partner, a lifeline, a piece of the road that always had their back. The C-15 didn't simply fade away when the regulations changed. It evolved into something much bigger, a symbol of the last truly mechanical era of diesel trucking. Today's engines might run cleaner, sip fuel smarter, and talk to satellites. But none of them inspire the kind of loyalty, nostalgia, and raw affection the C-15 still commands. And maybe that's the real legacy. An engine loved not because it was perfect, but because it was unforgettable. The CAT C-15 was more than a piece of machinery. It was a companion, a workhorse, a piece of American road culture. Its rise was glorious, its fall was messy, and its legend remains unbeatable. If you want the full combined script with a hook, CTA placement, or transitions between sections, just tell me. I'll format it exactly in your preferred YouTube style.